I don't think I ever got the opportunity to do a study abroad program through the development minor or anywhere else, but after that, after I graduated from BYU, I ended up getting a job in public sector consulting with PwC, where I think because of the economics, the BYU economics programs focus on data and statistics, I was able to sort of get on their analytics team, and that sort of unintentionally was where my career then sort of has headed after that. I work now at Bao Systems, which is a company known for implementing an open source public health data collection software called DHIS2. And our scope has grown from just that to, we do a lot of AWS implementation around data science. And we're growing beyond just public health to broadly poverty monitoring and a lot of COVID analysis right now. A lot of work with HIV, malaria, and tropical diseases, but other things related to development too. And I'm their head of analytic services, which is sort of how we group anything that is that mixture between data science and consulting. So yeah, that's it for me. Maybe Angie, do you want to take it next? And we'll just kind of pass around from there.
Sure. I'm Angie Fairchild. I graduated from BYU in 2010 with a degree in economics and a minor in international development. During my time at BYU, I was really involved with Kennedy Center programs. I did the Model UN program twice, which was fantastic. I had a great study abroad internship in Cambodia working with a health development organization. It was also fantastic and eye-opening, and I really loved the work that the Kennedy Center did then and continues to do. When I graduated, I began a series of short-term jobs in development work more directly. I led a Help International team in Uganda, and then I worked in a green energy project in China, and then I worked in monitoring and evaluation. And all of that was sort of in the first year after graduating, while I found my footing, and I ended up landing a position at the Research Triangle Institute in Durham, North Carolina, where I worked on patient advocacy. So it was sort of this funny hybrid between a strict research setting and a corporate consulting setting. So somewhere in the middle there, I did a lot of data work, both qualitative and quantitative. And the overall goal was to better represent patient voices in drug approval processes. I did that for about 8 years. In the middle, I quit my job as a regular employee and started my own consultancy doing a similar kind of work. I mostly worked with clients in the pharmaceutical industry and at the Duke Clinical Research Institute. And for the last 2 years, I have transitioned again. I'm now a PhD student studying corporate sustainability and corporate strategy at UNC Chapel Hill. So I think my pathway at the moment is somewhat different from the others on this panel in that I am not currently a data scientist. I am prepping for an academic career that will be heavily focused on impact and specifically the interface between corporations and organizations and the impact that they have on society at large.
Awesome. Maddie, you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. I am Madeline Gleeve. I am the Chief Data Scientist at a company called Nithio, which is an AI-enabled energy finance platform. I am based in Washington, D.C. I've been here pretty much since I graduated from BYU with a few excursions for fieldwork and for graduate school at Carnegie Mellon, where I did a degree in public policy and data science. At BYU, I was very involved, similar to Scott, with the Kennedy Center and Students for International Development, which is really where I got my start in, wanting a career for social impact and international development. I did a few field studies, research abroad with the Political Economy and Development Lab in Uganda with Dan Nielsen, and did double major in econ and political science with a minor in international development. So since BYU, I've always been really passionate about quantitative and evidence-based policy. So I spent the first couple of years of my career focused on policy work, but with kind of a data bent. So I did work at a think tank here in DC, did a lot of work on energy access policy and multilateral finance, which then ties in well with the work I do now at NIFIO, which is using data-driven solutions and kind of alternative credit scoring methods to better understand consumer ability to pay for energy services in Africa. So I currently work really closely with Rob. We work at sister companies. I use a lot of the data that his company produces to do my modeling work. But I've been doing that for the last 3 years and learned a lot about kind of startups and how you can develop products that are using data to benefit kind of social impact causes.
Awesome, thanks, Maddie. And Rob, you want to share next?
Yeah. My name is Rob Morello. I am the Director of Data Analytics and a co-founder of a company called Frame. Frame tells you about people and places where traditionally we don't have any data on those people. And then really cool companies like NIFIO use that to create credit scores and energy financing, or use them to plan development projects, or use them to untangle really thorny security situations. So I think it's a pretty cool company. I graduated from BYU technically in 2013 with a degree in political science. I left for the first time in 2011 and had an excursion and some other work in politics for a time, and then came back and finished my degree. That might be my biggest mistake, Scott, if you ask me that question. But I worked at a think tank, the same one as Madeline. She helped connect me at the Center for Global Development, where I looked at African data systems and data ecosystems, as well as US development policy, which was super cool. And then I worked on Frame for about the last 7+ years in building that company. So Frame is a lot of data, AI, ML, and combining different streams of data. And someday Scott and I will have a good partnership as well. We've been trying a couple times, not successful yet.
Yeah, for probably all of those 7 years, maybe a little longer, at 2 different companies. We've tried. Yeah, we'll make it happen.
I guess I should mention some BYU time. I worked at the Political Economy and Development Lab. At the time, it was Aid Data, so I coded development projects. And I had a really awesome internship with the sociology department doing project evaluation and assessment team. Pete, I don't know if it exists anymore. Corey's nodding. It was an awesome internship where I actually worked with Angie quite a bit on evaluating an NGO and some of their projects and programs.
Awesome. And Peter, this is entirely voluntary. Peter didn't know when he joined today that he'd be drafted onto the panel, but if you'd like to give an introduction and join, then feel free to do that. We would love to have you participate.
Sure, I didn't mean to be an interloper. I wanted to just check in with you all, and that'd be a good way to do that.
Drop some names, yeah.
Yeah, but let me just, briefly, I graduated from BYU in 2012 in political science and international development. A lot of the similar things that people have mentioned, SID, Kennedy Center involvement, MUN, and also did a Uganda mentored research abroad with Dan Nielsen and several people on the call as well. And then I ended up working with Dan for about a year in the political science department at BYU before I entered a PhD program at the University of Michigan. And I was in that program and then took a hiatus for a few years to work in Tanzania for IPA, Innovations for Poverty Action, where I was running several projects related to mobile phone technology and digital financial services, financial inclusion. We have a working paper out now, all these years later. So a lot of the work I do is sort of longer term projects on different elements that impact poverty. So we have a paper out on the effect of mobile technology for rural women in Tanzania. Came back to Michigan 2 years ago to finish my dissertation, And that work is on, I use big data to understand economic vulnerability better and its impacts on politics, political engagement. And so some of that work is related to using spatial data from Uganda on infrastructure and how infrastructure deficiencies impact vulnerability of individuals in rural settings. And yeah, so that's what my dissertation's about, and that's what I'm working on.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So I'll just sort of tee up where we're going to go today. And again, like Corey said, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we would love to hear from you in person. We're going to save 15 to 20 minutes or maybe more if we can at the end of this, just to have, you know, whatever questions you'd like to ask. But I'd also like to say, I think all of us probably would agree that if at any point after this you'd like to reach out to us, please do that. We are very, very interested in helping however we can. I think each of us has had our own struggle stories about finding our place in this field. It is not an easy place to figure out how to navigate. And we've all done it differently, as you can sort of guess and hear from our different stories. And I think the other thing that's interesting is we sort of found our tool set and how we want to contribute to some of the biggest problems we connect with in the world. We're even using that tool set slightly differently. And so if you have any questions, please let us know. I think it's also true that between the 5 of us, we represent a pretty robust network of BYU alumni who are in this field working actively in data for social impact. And so, you know, there are a number of them that couldn't be on this call that we invited, and many others that are out there that we'd be happy to help connect you with, depending on what your interest is, whether that's public health in specific or human rights or immigration. We know people in kind of all those various areas. So please feel free to reach out at any point after this as well. And you can find all of us on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there. So what I think we'll do first is I've got some questions that we've sort of looked at together that we'll kind of go through and I'll facilitate, and just to sort of get the ball rolling. And then again, you know, within the next 10 or 15 minutes, we'll transition over to questions from you all. But the goal here is, I think, more than anything, to inspire you that it is possible and really fulfilling to find a career in data for social impact, whether that's, you know, traditional development or, you know, more of a blend of the corporate sector, or whether that's corporate sustainable work, corporate sustainability work, or impact investment, or domestic issues here in the States. There are lots of ways to use data to make a difference. And so I would encourage you more than anything to walk away today with a sense of hope and possibility. I will also say that it is, again, difficult. And maybe that's where we'll start, is if we can, I'll just open up to folks who are free to jump in on the panel here. Whoever feels the most urgently like you've got something worth saying. I'm curious for you all, what has sort of all the things that you've done in your career path so far, what has made the biggest difference in getting you to where you are right now? Whether that's an experience that sort of motivated you to even start and that you look back to as your inspiration, whether that's a program you did at school that just keeps paying off for you, whether that's a mentor you had at BYU or elsewhere who has helped you sort of find your footing, or just a decision to be tenacious. So yeah, just open it up to anybody that wants to jump in there.
I can go first. So I think the biggest thing that influenced my career trajectory was related to what I said, which is developing kind of that love for quantitative answers to development questions. When I first started out, that was really heavily focused on research and kind of economic, you know, falling in love with econ and the econ major. I always was really hesitant to take econ classes, but then found that I really, really enjoyed them, and applying that kind of quantitative analysis framework to looking at public policy questions or localized kind of micro impact questions. And then being able to hone those skills through research assistantships in particular at BYU. So working a lot with Dan Nielsen, similar to several others here, but also a few other professors through different research labs and research field studies that I think taught me a lot of the, not necessarily, I mean, I used data at the time, which now I don't really use, but taught me how to think in terms of quantitative applications and how you would answer questions using data. So I think that's been one of the biggest things. And when I talk to students, that's what I always recommend is work for professors, do research assistantships, because especially at BYU, it's such a unique advantage. You don't have as many graduate students running around taking that, taking those jobs. So there's more opportunities than the average student, at least for undergraduates. And I think that's something really unique to take advantage of.
Awesome. Thanks, Maddie. One other, anyone else on the panel?
Yeah, I'll add to that. First of all, fully in support of what Maddie has said, that just coming to love the questions and the process of searching for answers leads you to develop the set of tools that's going to exploit your own capabilities best in order to make a difference there. I would add, however, the piece that has, I think, helped me progress relates really closely to the soft skills that you don't necessarily learn in a classroom. Those are things like becoming comfortable talking about data and about analyses in a way that makes sense to somebody who's not in it the way you are in it, right? If I'm working on a really complex econometric problem and all I can do is like write the equation on a chalkboard, that doesn't actually help me sell my solution to the FDA or to a corporate organization that I'm trying to like pitch on this idea. So be able to express yourself in a way that is understandable and be confident in the leverage that that gives you to be a person who does understand the mechanics and who at the same time can communicate.
Thanks, Angie. So next one, this is sort of, I'll go back to something Maddie said. So I also did a lot of Stata when I was at BYU in the econ program, which again, I've used 0 times since I left BYU, but it's because of my experience with Stata that I got my first job where we use SAS 100% of the time. I also don't use SAS at all ever anymore, mostly because of the price tag, but I use R every single day. I've got 3 screens up and 2 of them are R code right now. And so I use R a ton. And Python is another big one, but just across the panel, I'm curious if anyone has any opinions about technical skills that you would highly recommend someone interested in this field should consider picking up and how they might do that.
I opened Stata yesterday. And I looked at survey data in Stata, I tabulated things, and I'm currently running some surveys, and I needed to make sure the data wasn't junk, and I didn't have time to like delegate it out. So I popped it open, I got it to work. I was very proud of myself. On my team, it's a little bit of Stata, it's a lot of R, and then as people become more and more technical, it's more and more Python. I would say teach yourself to code in something or take the classes that force you to code in something, but more importantly, teach yourself to Google answers. Like coding is mostly Googling to figure out how to do something. So like you can do that for Stata, you can do it for R, you can do it for Python. And like you do kind of need this base knowledge, and I would do my best to learn that base knowledge. But like after that, it's a lot of like Stack Overflow. And just looking things up. And then I'm going to echo Angie's point because I don't want it to be missed. I feel like the first X number of years of your career you're going to feel like coding is the most important thing. And you're going to realize that the next step in your career is all about the soft skills. It's all about your ability to not just be able to write the equation, but also have the confidence that you can communicate what that equation means to people who don't understand your equation. And like, it's really hard to get that balance and to continue growing both because you'll feel like, oh, college, they're telling me all about these soft skills and I need more hard skills. And it's hard to get that balance, but you've got to balance it in order to keep moving forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could just add a story to that. And this is going to sound maybe a bit harsh, but We were looking to hire a data scientist on the team a month or two ago, and we had one candidate who on paper looked great. And I did a verbal case study with him, and he literally started telling me the exact Python packages he would use to solve the problem, to a point which it was extremely admirable, and none of them were wrong, but he lacked any context of why you would use them. And in the actual case study that he ended up doing, he made a lot of assumptions that just frankly didn't make any sense, and had no explanation for why he made them. And we ended up passing for purely that reason, because lacking kind of the wisdom, and this is something that, you know, comes through experience. I don't want anybody to feel like intimidated, but, you know, as you progress in your career and you learn from mentors, really pay attention to the rationale of why you use certain techniques or tools in data, or why, you know, why certain distributions are happening, because I think that's one of the most valuable skills, and it's something that is one of the most self-directed. It's difficult to teach someone that by force if they're not motivated to ask those questions.
I'd add to that and just say that I think all of us would probably say that it's, coding is, we're more likely to say than like the average person that coding is enjoyable, that there's something appealing about taking a data set and cleaning it and learning from it. But I think it's important to use these languages as a tool and not the lens through which you view the world. And it's like really important, more important really, to ask good questions. And in both the realms I've, in grad school, academic path, as well as a research organization I was working with, that's really the coin of the realm, is asking good questions. And then you use these tools to get you to the answer. But part of what I've learned, it's taken time to learn, is like, it can't just be that you're really good at coding. You also need to have the ability to think through a problem well, and ask the right question of the data, and be able to communicate that answer.
Yeah, and I'll just maybe share a thought on the soft skills thing that a few folks have brought up, in that, in my experience, no matter how academic or how technical your role, if all you're doing is producing numbers and analyses and you can't ever drive them into a set of decision makers' hands, then you sort of have to question your use of time, especially in a world where there's so many issues to solve, and I don't know. I feel like the imperative to make a difference is so high in so many places right now. And so if you're spending all your time producing numbers that no one can really use to make a difference, then you've got to really question why. And to do that, you have to be able to tell stories with data and answer important questions. Questions that aren't just sort of like ethereal, but actually help someone make the decisions necessary to make a difference. And it requires a lot of empathy to do that. I think it also requires the ability to, we've talked about coding skills, but we haven't talked about, for example, all the side of data that is visualization and storytelling, understanding Tableau, understanding how to use business intelligence tools, how to design dashboards that make sense to people and answer the right questions. There's a whole school of research about how to do that. And so I think that's another area that if you're not particularly interested in coding, but still want to have a role in data for social impact, just take a look at some of the things that New York Times or World Bank or other places like that are doing with data, and it's fascinating the things they're able to do. So maybe I'll take a detour to some education questions, maybe first to Angie and Peter. So you guys have both chosen to go the route of like a PhD in academic route. And so I'm curious for you all, what played into that decision, and what do you think is for students that might consider that something that they should think about or know as how that could help them?
All right, I can take this one first. There were several factors involved in my decision to start a PhD when I did, and in the discipline that I chose. one of them that can't be ignored is the influence that professors had on me and on my intellectual development and on the way that I saw the world. Making an impact on students and through research is a really different kind of impact than the one you might have if you're working in private industry, creating algorithms, creating products that are boots on the ground. But to me, it is a type of impact on individuals and on sort of broad scale system level conversations. It really speaks to me. So that's where I wanted to position myself as an individual making impact. A second reason on the sort of more practical side is that my first career, my original career was in health economics research, and it was in a field where like basically everyone has a PhD and possibly also an MD and several master's degrees. So I found myself like walking into these meetings where I'm presenting my research that I was primary on. I led this thing, I did all of the analysis, and I have a bachelor's degree, and I got like sort of honorary Dr. Fairchilded all the time, to the point where it got to be like, you guys, I can't keep doing this in this field where credentials actually do matter. Some of that is because I picked a field that's very credential heavy. Probably all of that would not happen in other spaces where you can have a lot of impact with data. But that's where I found myself. So it was time for a pivot. I pivoted to business sustainability instead of healthcare, which is kind of a sea change. I'm happy to talk about that, but that's not really the specific question asked. So I can turn this over to Peter. Peter, what brought you into academia?
Sure. I mean, so it started in the Kennedy Center, like literally the building at SID, watching Esther Duflo, her TED Talk. And afterwards, Mehdi and I were like, RCTs, like research for development, like got real jazzed about that. And that kind of led to, you know, doing the mentored research in Uganda that Rob led that year, which led down this path of deciding to, pursue these bigger research projects, longer term research projects. I don't know if they're bigger in size, but they're longer term certainly than some of the other work that's done on the panel. And yeah, so I mean, part of the appeal was this idea that Angie discussed of using research to address policy issues. Kind of the conversations that happen in academia around development have a lot of sway, I think, over some of the policy decisions that are made. And so that was sort of the angle that I fell into in some ways, but definitely pursued actively. And then one thing I definitely recommend if you're thinking of pursuing an academic route is do other work first. Get some experience, especially the kinds of experiences that can get you, if you're interested in studying development, that kind of area of social impact in some part of the world, try to go get a job that works, either puts you in the country or working on those issues. I'd say that can be really helpful in informing the kinds of questions you ask if you decide to go pursue a degree. I mean, I took a hiatus from my program in part because I wanted more of that experience, and it's definitely informed what I'm doing now in my dissertation. But yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Can I add one thing to Peter's comment? It is so important that you find a field job that gets you out working and gaining experience before starting a PhD, if the PhD is your plan. If I had gone straight into a PhD, I would have been in public health. At this point, 11 years after graduation, I'm a totally different person. The experiences that I had really changed me. I am much happier with the path that I have taken than the one that I thought I would have liked when I was like 21 and thinking about applying to PhD programs right out of school. So either the experience of working in the field will change you and you will find a direction that suits you better that you never anticipated, or the experience in the field will reinforce to you the interests that you already know that you have and will prepare you to be a better PhD student and academic in the future.
Yeah, and I would say I had the reverse thing happen where I thought I was going to do a PhD graduating from BYU. Decided mostly because I did an intern at Washington Seminar my second to last semester and didn't get my GRE application in on time to be able to apply, which ended up being very fortuitous because then I decided, okay, I'll try working in policy for a couple of years because that's kind of what I want to, what I would want to study, and realized that I was more passionate about sort of the applied data work than the research-oriented work, even though I still find that really fascinating and love being in those conversations. So I would definitely double down on what people have said about work experience before you go to any type of grad school, even if it's a master's degree.
Awesome. And I do want to make sure that we keep time for, we have a good set of, I think, really thoughtful questions here in the chat and that we'd love to have people ask. So I do have a few other questions, but I think let's connect over to the questions from folks. And I'll also mention, I don't think the panelists have been kind of humble here, but Maddie, what year was it you were in the SID presidency? Was that 2009, 10?
Peter, when were you? I was the year after.
I was 2009, 10.
Yeah, I think it was 2010 to 2011 or 2011 to 2012.
And we actually have a lurker, Mike Monroe is on the call too, who was in the SID presidency at the same time as Peter. So Mike, if you are welcome to chime in and introduce yourself, but also help answer questions if you'd like.
I'm actually dialing in from a secure environment, so I won't be able to come on, but I'll just lurk. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Peter was also in your same boat where he joined just to listen and got roped in. But Mike has been a mentor to me for a long time, and so yeah, just want to mention Mike as well. So we'll start with some of these questions. So the first one I see here is: do you ever feel disconnected from the issues you work with because you're in analytics? And the person that wrote this, do you want to turn on your video and chat and add anything else to that? You're welcome to if you'd like.
Hi, sorry, were you asking me to ask my question?
Yeah, I just read it, but you're welcome to add any context there or introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm in 2 meetings right now, so I'm just trying to balance. But I wanted to ask about the disconnection because I have been in an analytics internship myself this semester with conflict stabilizations with the State Department. And I love data, but I also sometimes feel like other people have more exciting experiences like using the data. And so I just kind of wanted to ask like what your experience has been with that and any advice you have.
Thank you. Yeah, awesome question. I have some thoughts, so maybe I'll defer first if anyone wants to chime in.
I can try it this one. For me, these problems are hard and thorny, and they take all sorts of people to solve them. And I had to kind of take a hard look at myself and decide where I thought my best value add was, and that was with the data. And it was crunching the data, and that gave me like what I feel like is a real value add to solving these really, really important problems and really difficult problems. What I have found is like I've never felt disconnected because I'm the data guy. I got in the room with everybody else and we're having a conversation, and you continue to build that network and be in that room and continue to work on these really hard issues. I don't know if that's just my personality or like if other people have had that same experience, but I've never felt disconnected. I felt like I'm in the thick of it as much as I could be.
Yeah, I can speak. So, I mean, I guess somewhat of a similar position to Rob, where, you know, my job is to build a product that somebody wants to use that informs them with data. So it's really important for me to listen well about the issues that they're facing. So we work with companies that are selling these, you know, really small scale solar kits that people can install in their homes. And sometimes I do feel disconnected, but the answer for me is to make sure that I'm listening really well to our clients and users, or to, you know, we also work with a lot of individuals who are trying to invest and provide, you know, more capital to flow into that sector, so that, you know, there's more of these systems that can be sold. And so listening really well to the challenges that they're facing helps with that. But I can't lie, like there are definite times when sometimes I wish, you know, I was closer to the ground and doing more individual work. I think that there have been opportunities to do more of that research. Doing research, I think, sometimes gives you more of the opportunities if you choose to go that route, especially if it's more like primary data collection type of work. But I think regardless, I would echo what Rob said, which is if you're doing a good job with data, you are putting yourselves in conversations with stakeholders and with decision makers. And like you said, Scott, that, you know, that are the ones who are doing the work or are closer to that. So you can get that feedback and know how it's being used and how it's helping.
And maybe I'll add one other thing. So I attended in 2018 the first UN World Data Forum, where we had statisticians from every Ministry of Statistics and UN across the globe, all sorts of nonprofits too. And I remember sitting in a room with a woman, I think she was from Tanzania or East Africa somewhere, and she, you know, stood up and told the story all about how for women in rural settings in a lot of Africa, you know, they just aren't represented in data, period. So when governments make decisions about their populace and they have no idea the problems that women are facing, or in the United States, basically globally, those that are differently abled, or you know, I think about in South Africa for decades, the Black African population was not represented in the census, and so decisions about poverty didn't even contemplate the reality of what was going on. And it was only in the last 3 or 4 decades when that has slowly begun to be right-sized. And there's like a, yes, you can feel disconnected from the data so long as mentally you disconnect yourself from what it means. That every single one of those numbers is a human being who, you know, if they're not represented in the census or in data sets or in decision making, then they're ostracized. And so to the degree that work, like, for example, that Rob and his company are doing to help represent people, to find people who are down at that level and represent their real lived experiences in the way that people make decisions at, you know, in the global north, I think there's a lot of virtue in that, if you ask me. Thank you for the question. Maybe we'll go to the next one. So Caleb Greaves, if you're on, we got a question over email from you. You're welcome to ask.
I don't think he's with us.
No, okay, I'll just summarize. So he said, my major, which is economics, does have a few data science courses, but it's not the same level as like a computer science major. What's the expected level for entry-level positions there? And a sort of related question that he tacked on that was, how do you find jobs like the ones that we're talking about, whether that's Indeed or some other place? And he asked about coding languages, but we kind of have already answered that, so we'll skip that one. So yeah, so, you know, what is that balance between data science and information systems or computer science in your experience? And Rob, I think part of this, I want to defer to you on the AI and ML side, and I can chime in a little bit from my experience, but also, yeah, just how to find jobs doing this. Rob, do you want to go first there?
It's a tricky one, and I feel like I always feel a little bit of like imposter syndrome on this stuff. So I'll put that as a caveat. true. I'm often called a data scientist, and I think on the spectrum, I'm a data scientist. I do not have a PhD, and to be honest, I do not understand the math behind a support vector system. What I can do is I can explain a support vector system in a way that people understand it, and I can understand the guy or the woman who's programming the SVM enough to like make a transition, and I feel okay with that. And I feel like I have the academic background to do that role. I think you've got to pick where you want to be on that spectrum and pursue it. So that would kind of be my answer to that question. And then fill in your gaps with Googling, like I said earlier. And at least learn to read the math. It will be helpful, even if you don't completely understand it.
So I'm really glad that I'm not the only person who Googles things pretty prolifically all the time, because like if you're in an interesting job, ideally you're running into challenges that you haven't had before, which means you need to have a skill for finding the solution to that challenge. I can speak to my experience working in more corporate America and the hiring practices that we had there. We were looking to hire entry-level candidates who had the intuition for the data and who knew how to code in something. The teams that I worked on first in the corporate world worked a lot in Stata and in SAS and in a couple of other more specialty programs specific to what we were doing. And we did not expect our candidates to be proficient in all of them. We expected them to demonstrate that they were capable of learning at least one, and to demonstrate that they were willing to learn and motivated to learn, which are two different things. So again, this kind of speaks to soft skills. Like if you've landed an interview with somebody and you know that your skill set is not 100% exactly what the existing team does, your task then is to convince them that the deficits that exist are overcomable.
Yeah, and I'll just say, as someone who hires people on a data analytics team, one thing that I think can potentially set you apart is just pick up projects, or you just think of questions you'd like to answer and write some code and put it on GitHub. And a GitHub portfolio can really help you out. I would also say, like, everything that I know now about R and SAS, I taught myself, but it's because I had, let's be honest, in the econ program, I also taught myself Stata, but I think because I learned that in a sort of supported environment, it was easier for me to do that afterwards. And yeah, I don't feel any conflict about having had to do that. There are a lot of certificates out there you can pick up too along the way. And just, I'm looking at the time. Nate, I hope I pronounced your last name, but Nate McGee, if you're on the line, do you want to answer or ask your question, which is, I think, sort of related here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm an econ major. Thanks for doing this. This is really exciting for me. Kind of the background to the question, I think there's just a lot more overlap between data science and kind of development or public policy than I realized there was. And I realized some of that is in academia, some of that is in the government, but a lot of that is kind of in the private sector as well. So I just wanted to ask, kind of a follow-up to finding these jobs, like, are there places or resources or people you recommend becoming familiar with, just to sort of open my eyes to this world?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think one of the questions I was thinking about that you posed or in our prep work, Scott, was like, what would you, how would you provide advice? And I think it's like, you have to decide what type of work you want to be doing, because there's sort of two worlds. You can either use, this is an oversimplification, but you can either use big data to solve small problems that are like oriented around business operations or like small decision makings or making things more efficient or more optimized. Not that those aren't important questions, but they're sort of like more micro level questions. Or you can do more policy oriented work, which uses not necessarily small data, but a different type of data, maybe less like production data, I would say, to answer big questions. So large research projects, or you're using more kind of country level statistics or things like that. And you kind of have to figure out which of those you care about. And there are different thought leaders in each of those spaces. So for the former, you're going to look at more interesting like tech companies, or look at kind of the operations teams of large institutions that are using data science to optimize their work. And for the latter, looking at think tanks, I mean, CGD, where Rob and I worked, is a great one. USAID used to have a really cool data science lab, which I think kind of got a little bit shrunk in the last administration, but I think is coming back. And there's some other, just really interesting industry kind of development for data, humanitarian data, different initiatives to look out for.
I also wouldn't undercredit the benefit of informational interviews. I do them pretty often, and people tell me they're useful, where I just spill out over 30 minutes a ton of organizations that I know that are mildly working on the issues that a student is interested on. And they've got 25 leads to go look at who's hiring entry-level positions. And I know a lot of BYU alumni, there's a very strong network, at least in DC, but also elsewhere, that just are happy to take half an hour to help a student out. So I wouldn't be shy about that. It's not always easy to do, but I would encourage people to think about that.
I think another practicality to bear in mind that is not relevant for everyone, but has been relevant for me is I have often been looking for jobs in a specific geographic area. And what that just entails a really different search process, right? I literally made a list of every organization in the directory of like local civics groups, or the Secretary of State's listing of all businesses in a municipality. And I looked for anything that might possibly fit, and I contacted people because I needed something really specific. If you can be more flexible, that's great. If you can't be flexible, you'll often find that there are really creative and really interesting opportunities that you might not have considered if you had a different set of constraints.
Yeah, and we've all, not that this is my area of expertise, but we've talked a lot about international social impact, but domestic social impact, a lot of local governments. When I was doing my graduate program at Carnegie Mellon, we had a lot of partnerships with the Pittsburgh city government and the county government and the state government that are doing really, really, really interesting work with open data initiatives, civic kind of hacking initiatives, optimizing policy decisions or program benefit decisions using data. And they often are the ones who own a lot of their really interesting data and are collecting it. So it definitely, on Angie's point, like when I was doing my my internships for grad school, that because I was geographically constrained, that was a lot of the areas that I looked at. And I think you can find that in many places.
And then we have one last question. Jillian, do you want to ask your question about analytic algorithms? Feel free to add any context you want there too.
Yeah, so I've been gaining some interest in perhaps leveraging public databases or other databases for public good. For example, the Mosaic threat assessment sort of system that's being used in California for battered women's shelters, or the algorithm being tested in Pennsylvania. Sorry, not Pennsylvania. Yes, Pennsylvania, for screening CPS calls, whether a social worker should go out and check those calls. So I'm just kind of wondering if maybe anyone here has experience with developing those kind of algorithms or working with those kinds of algorithms, or maybe have some advice of where I could go to pursue that kind of work.
Rob, are you hiring? Because that's a lot of what Frame does. I know on our side,
we are actually.
Yeah, I'll just speak sort of quickly about sort of a lot of what I've seen, which is I think that any degree of, I've done a lot of work with Department of Education, Department of Labor, Secret Service, Department of Justice, State Department, Peace Corps, MCC, all over the place, the UN, everybody sort of has different ways of tackling problems, but anytime you can bring to bear publicly available data, and the more that you're sort of aware of how to do that, I think that's always in your advantage. I think the UN Global Pulse Lab is a really good example of a place that's doing this really well. I think the World Bank has done a great job of making their data publicly available in a way that's easy to grab from people. Maybe I'll just stop there. I think there are a lot of places that do this. In fact, I would say that anywhere you go, if you can cogently bring together publicly data to address problems, it's going to be an advantage. I'm working on a project right now for the FCDO, which is, it's DFID's new name, but where we're taking publicly available HIV data, combining it with publicly available COVID data, and creating an open data portal for them to use. So yeah, there are always ways to do it. And I think one thing that we run into a lot is if it's openly or publicly available open data, there are a lot of interesting pipelines you can learn how to build in R and Python to scrape data and pull it into systems, and that's not an undervalued skill for sure. So I'll stop there.
I'll just briefly say I'm glad that this issue of algorithms has come up, because we need more people in this world that have both sort of a social conscience and knowledge of algorithms, because a lot of the algorithms being designed do not have that in mind, and there's really bad externalities from that.
Yeah, ethics coursework should be mandatory for any data science program. That's my strong feeling.
Yeah.
Back on the soft skills. Not that it's a soft skill, there's actually a lot of research that you need to do about it, but.
So I'm just looking at the time, I don't want to be conscious. So if anyone at any point after this has questions or would like to reach out, I think the answer to your question earlier, Nate, is one that I'll just re-emphasize, which is that the most helpful thing I have done in my career in order to move me forward is to do what Rob said and either give or ask for informational interviews, just to network with as many people as possible. It took me a year to find my first job because I was doing my best to get a career in international development. And I ended up, I felt like a dismal number of steps away from it, working in consulting. But I think my experience and if anyone, I think Mike Monroe, who's also on the call, I think his experience probably emphasizes this too, is that there's a lot to gain from that. And I didn't find either of my first jobs, except through networking. So feel free to reach out to us. Happy to help however we can. I think, again, the whole point that I'd like to leave with you all to walk away with today is it is possible, not easy, but possible and incredibly fulfilling to find a job, a career in data for social impact. And I hope that our experiences that we've shared have sort of illustrated how what you're doing right now will set you up for that. The relationships that you're creating right now, the skills you're learning, the classes you're taking, the questions you're asking that are ones that are just driving your interest more than maybe anything else. So, nurture those things and feel free to reach out. I don't know if anyone else on the panel wants to take a few seconds and add anything else.
Really well said. Thanks, Scott.
Great, and just big appreciation to everybody on the panel for taking time here. Corey, any closing thoughts from you?
No, thanks to each of you, and thanks to all the participants and to those who will watch this a little later. Lots of really great insights and ideas, and hopefully we can build on all of the experience and success that each of you have had. This is a really interesting area, and it's fun to see it kind of expand dynamically through each of your experiences and how they intersect and overlap. I had to put in a plug for Sid, but there's so many different ways to get those soft skills. I don't think it's a coincidence that there's common thread lines between working on campaigns and getting involved with startups and organizing events. And there's so many different ways to get that experience. I hear that soft skill part echoing through. We've done a couple of conferences with the liberal arts community on campus, and soft skills, the T-shaped student, this comes up over and over and over, research out of Michigan State. So just echoing what you're saying to our students to, it's not either or, it's not all data or not data, right? This is really helpful information. So thanks again, and hope to have you all back again soon.